Oh, I hate the international break. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Bad News Show. Joining every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. I cannot promise you that today is going to see me in any kind of good mood, because it's not. I feel like I'm already at the end of the tether that was left from previous days in the international break, talking about Calafiori getting injured or other players getting afflictions. And now, of course, we've got even more bad news to talk about as Arsenal's start to the season just continues to get hammered and chipped away at. It's absolutely just gutting. But we'll talk about that and more in a little bit. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Really appreciate your time to do so. I'm going to try and remain as composed as I can. But I imagine that at some stage in probably the catching up of this show, you'll see some comments that are the usual. Tom's so condescending. There's going to be condescendingness, if that's even a word. I can sense it. I can feel it. It's brewing. It's building. It's bubbling away inside of me, because I'm already losing patience with some of the views I'm seeing on social media in the last 12 hours. But it is what it is. Right. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Good morning to Shari and Granddaddy Gooner, Louis, Dylan, Maximius, Edison, Runs with Cows, Angela, Steve. We've got Kevin. We've got Stevie. My Dog Is My Heart joins us as well. We've got Paul. We've got Ogun. We've got plenty more of you all joining us today. Thank you for doing so. If you could be ever so kind to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And I would really appreciate it. So thank you for that. I appreciate your time. Let's jump though to today's story, not stories, just story. One slide is all I've got for you. One today, because that's all it's going to take. There may be other news out there. Quite frankly, I haven't looked into it because there is only one thing that is taking my attention. And that is Martin Odegaard yesterday for Norway, coming off injured after a rather nasty looking ankle twist in Norway's game against someone. But I've lost all sense of what's going on. It was Austria, wasn't it? They were playing. They did go on to win the game. Erling Haaland starting and scoring in that game to win the game 2-1 come full time. So here's where I'm at. This international break, as I spoke about the other day, I think is the where I'll start with this. This international break is so stupid, so pointless, so ridiculous that it exists here and now. Like, it doesn't make any reason for it to be here. The Nations League is an absolute farce. It is a hyperbole of a friendly, is what it is. It's a glorification of games that needed to be scrapped anyway. This break should not exist, and at a very minimum, we should be seeing, and to be fair, this doesn't even include Odegaard to this degree, but players that played in summer tournaments should not be allowed to join up for this particular international break. They just shouldn't. But regardless of what I feel about international breaks and international football as a whole, and where the stupidity to put this break in right now, where it is as of now, 3 games into a new season of European football, it's absolutely just the frustration that after obviously Odegaard comes off against Brighton after a nasty kick that sees him struggling and in pain in that game, that he starts both fixtures for Norway, that there's no consciousness to manage his minutes on an international side. And I have kind of an order of where I'm frustrated. I'm annoyed at Norway for obvious reason, the Norway national side, for using him just so blazingly. I mean, we heard from Solbakken after the game in his interview where he spoke about Arteta is not going to be ringing me up, praising me, which, I mean, I read that quote and listened to that quote as something like, it gave me the sense just hearing it, and I could be wrong. I'm purely extrapolating with this theory, but it gave me the sense that there'd been concerns raised. That's what the sense I got from when he said about Arteta's not going to be ringing up and praising him. Like, that's the feeling I got, is that some concern had already been raised in this regard about Norway playing Odegaard after the Brighton situation. The second annoyance is obviously going to be more on Odegaard to a degree as well, because after his kick, after his injury, you feel like maybe with the games coming up, should he in some way, shape or form be a little bit more conscious and say, and pull out the second game? He's played the first game. We got away with that to a degree. Should he play the second game? It's difficult though, because he's the captain of the team. So to pull out, you feel like you need someone else to do it for him. And obviously third on the list is Arsenal, because I've watched Cole Palmer leave the England team and be in Chelsea training this week. Images are out of Palmer training already with the Chelsea team ahead of this game, ahead of this weekend's games, despite the fact he pulled out of England duty. And we see it time and time again with other players of other clubs. They don't play for their countries, or they pull out early, or they pull out midway through the break, and then they're in action with their clubs the weekend afterwards. It's just so annoying that it happens so blazingly across other sides and other clubs. It doesn't seem to happen in the same vein. We have absolutely blocked players in the past from joining up with their nations. There was a situation in 2020 with Gabriel Martinelli and the Brazil under-23 squad. There was a situation, I think, in 2022, perhaps, with Gabriel Jesus and the Brazil squad, that Jesus had an injury. We didn't want him to go to the Brazil squad, and they called him up anyway, and they wanted to assess him themselves, right? Because there was it felt as though there seemed to be kind of a growing lack of trust. I don't know if that's the right phrase to use, but it felt like there was an issue there. But Arsenal weren't keen on Jesus going, but Brazil called him up anyway because they wanted to assess him themselves. It's clear that obviously these situations need to be taken out of people's hands. And for me, that's done by scrapping this international break entirely. The September one, I'm not fussed about the one a little bit later on. I'm not fussed about the March one next year. But the one that's now, this particular international break, 3 games into a new season, it's just stupid. It's just absolutely stupid to be here, to be in this moment. So that's where I'm kind of at with the whole international, who are you pointing the blame at, blah, 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 where I'm at. The next phase is this whole rhetoric of the transfer market that surrounds this. The whole rhetoric of, we didn't do enough in the market. We should have signed a backup to Odegaard. We should have signed X. We should have signed Y. We shouldn't have loaned Fabio Vieira. From the perspective of that, I just can't get my head around how, in one hand, I can sit and do shows throughout the course of 2 years where I'm being told week after week that Fabio Vieira plays, that he's not good enough for Arsenal, that Arteta and Arsenal made a huge mistake signing Fabio Vieira, that it's a £34 million flop. Look at the £34 million Arsenal spent on Fabio Vieira. He's dreadful. And then those same people coming back here, this moment, right now, going, I can't believe we loaned out Fabio Vieira. Unbelievable, just silliness from Arsenal to do that. The whole Fabio Vieira thing, it's such hypocrisy. It's a massive, massive contradiction. And it's crazy to look into that view, to look into that position, and to believe that a player that has been so ostracized and so criticized and so scrutinized for not being good enough by not just those people, but myself. I've said before that for 2 years, I give those players 2 years. You come in, you get 2 seasons. And after 2 seasons, if you've not done enough, you should go. And Arsenal made the right decision in doing that. And not only that, but one of the big reasons why we loaned Fabio Vieira was so that we could open up the pathway to Ethan Nwaneri. Now, that being said, I don't want Ethan Nwaneri starting on Sunday. I do not want him starting on Sunday. And I know that may sound like a little bit of a complication with the whole, you open up the pathway by loaning out Vieira, but then you're saying you don't want him to start against Spurs, but I'll explain that. But the point of loaning out Vieira is because any minutes that Vieira, for me, probably would have got throughout the course of the season, I would have rather invested those in Nwaneri. But not here. Not at this point. Not at this stage. Because Arsenal don't sign backups anymore. Backups is a thing of the past. We don't sign backups. I tweeted this yesterday. Arsenal sign assets. Arsenal sign players that can play in multiple positions, because the idea of convincing a player to come in and play behind Odegaard or play behind Saka that is anywhere close to their level is next to impossible. Next to impossible to do. You people calling out for Johan Bakayoko in the summer to back up Saka, despite the fact that he's gone on record saying that he wants to start for a team that are chasing the title, not going to happen. The idea of signing Eberechi Eze, of course, as well. Are you really going to turn to Eze and say, oh, yeah, we're going to sign you, but you're going to be on the bench behind Odegaard for the whole season? He's the captain. He's going to start. I got into a couple of debates yesterday, people saying that, Odegaard shouldn't play against Spurs, Atalanta, and Man City. And I'm like, why wouldn't he start against those teams? If Manchester City had games against Arsenal, Atalanta, and Spurs, would Erling Haaland start all those 3 games? Of course he would. Of course he would start all those 3 games. Erling Haaland started every single Champions League game bar one, and the only game that he didn't start was because he was out for a month in December with a significant injury that meant he missed the whole Christmas period. That's the reality of those clubs. If you're the best player, you start. You start those games. And if you're the club captain, you start. This idea of Arteta being criticised for squad rotation or not rotating players enough, or that he shouldn't have started in those games, is a fallacy. It's always going to happen. It's always going to happen. You've got games against Spurs, Atalanta away from home in this new Champions League phase, and then Man City. Your best players start all 3 games. They're going to do that because Atalanta away is one of our tougher Champions League fixtures that we need to make sure that we win to get off to a good start in the league phase, so we're not already chasing from behind. They're going to play. They're going to start those games. Factually, that's going to happen. And it would happen at any top club. For Liverpool, Salah would start all those games. For City, Haaland would start all of those games. And Odegaard and Saka are our own Haalands and our own Salahs. They are our own most important talismanic figures in this team. That's just a reality of where we're at. But the idea that we can criticise Arsenal for loading out Fabio Vieira, despite the fact that for so often, we've been in a position whereby we've said he's not good enough, just doesn't make sense. Arsenal have a number of players who can play in the attacking midfield role. You've got Kai Havertz, you've got Leandro Trossard, you've got Mika Moreno, who is sadly obviously injured, and Ethan Nwaneri, as we've already brought up as well. We sign assets. We sign players that can play in multiple positions. Because you cannot go out into the market and sign a player that is just going to be a backup at this level. Even Julian Alvarez at Manchester City, who played plenty of games for City, a lot coming off the bench, but plenty of starts as well, and was their 3rd highest goal scorer in 2 consecutive seasons, is gone because an 80 to 90 million pound rated player was not happy at Manchester City being second fodder to Erling Haaland. So he's gone. After 2 seasons, one of the most exciting young players in the Premier League is gone because he's not happy being the backup to Erling Haaland. And if Arsenal go out and spend, what it takes to bring in a competent backup, say, to Saka or to Odegaard, which is really tough to find, and Julian Alvarez was an absolute gem of a find from Manchester City, that they are hoping they can do again with Savinho, who cost them more than double the price that they paid for Julian Alvarez, of course, as well. It's so hard to find a player that's going to be a backup in those positions, to convince somebody that if you lose Odegaard or you lose Saka, that you're going to have someone come into that position that's nearly as good as them, is next to impossible. Absolutely next to impossible. So that's the situation we're in. I may open up the phone lines in part 2, but only for those people that really want to challenge. I can see we've got some angry people in the chat box. Of course, the phone lines will open for those people exclusively. I don't need to be, mollycoddled and say, you're absolutely right, Tom, because I feel I am already. So I'll be happy to hear from people that vehemently, however you pronounce that word, disagree with me on it. But we're going to go into part 2. I saw someone leaving a comment in the chat box earlier. Let me see if I can find it. I may not be able to. I'll have a look. Someone just said, do you want our opinions or not? Yeah, David says, do you want our opinions? David, how the show works. We have part 1, we have part 2. If you've been listening over the summer, part 1, I have a chat with you. Part 2, I hear from you. That's how it works. And we're going to go to part 2 very shortly. What I do need to tell you about is the only real benefit of anything international right now. And that's the superpower of changing your geolocation on your laptop, your phone, or indeed your tablet with the power of NordVPN. So if you do dare risk your own little international break, which I am doing this weekend, by the way, by hopping over to Ireland, So if I ever need to hop back to the UK digitally to watch anything that's not accessible while I'm out there because it's location locked, I will be using NordVPN, because the international break for you and me is protected by the fantastic, the brilliant, number one service that is out there for your VPNs, and that is, of course, NordVPN. So please do hop over to the link in the chat box and the link in the description. And, of course, go to nordvpn.com/Gooner to get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan. And if you're not happy with the service, as I say, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, this prize of courtesy of Football Prizes, the signed and framed Arsene Wenger shirt, is gone. Done. Finished. Good luck to all of you, of course, that entered into that competition. And I really hope that you are successful in doing that. I can tell you that there are plenty more opportunities to win prizes on the website. Head over to footballprizes.com, go onto the competitions page and check out all the latest opportunities to win the offers that are there for you. The link, of course, to do that is always down in the description. And I'm looking forward to seeing if we get any winners, because we've had some fantastic runs previously of our listeners winning as well. Right, let's go to part 2 and more right after this. Right, lovely stuff. We're obviously going to be opening up the floor to commenters in the chat. I can see, I think Andrew's in the chat being very, very confrontational. Classic. But he goes, if you don't like my opinion, you can block me. Andrew, the phone lines are open to you, mate. Hop on, have a chat. All you need is a webcam. You need to be over the age of 18, which sometimes I know is a struggle for some. But the phone lines are open. Just let me know that you'd like to have your opinions heard on here, and I'll happily hear your point of view. I'd love to. I really, really would. Loga says the coaching staff will not be wasting time moaning about the international break. They'll be thinking hard about the best team to put out on Sunday. Of course they will. That's something that the Arsenal's focus will already be on Sunday. It will already be on the weekend. They will be focusing on that. They'll be focusing on what they need to do, what team they need to put out, and what team they need to be able to, try and work a way around Tottenham. Another, just to talk about this rhetoric, you may have seen it, rival supporters absolutely loving the fact Odegaard's been injured, by the way. It shows you how rent-free we live in so many rival supporters' minds across social media. I saw a comment that I replied to this morning on my TGT Twitter account. It's a guy on Twitter called Mr. Black at Mr. Black Football, said they're finally getting some injuries to key players after 3 years of unbelievable luck. Now, just for the records, in the last 3 years, Jurrien Timber missed the entire season last year after just signing. Thomas Partey has missed 59 games for club and country during those 3 years. Bukayo Saka ended up missing our most important home game of the season against City that we still won. And had the season come down to the final day where we could have won it by winning it, rather than just need to try and keep it alive, he missed that game as well because of injury. Gabriel Martinelli's missed 13 games. Gabriel Jesus has missed 33 games. William Saliba's missed 18, including the end of the 22-23 season, which effectively, with his absence, cost us the title, with how lacking we were, of course, without that player as good as him in that defence. Mika Moreno is signed and is already out for a few weeks. Tomiyasu is continuously injured. Smith Rowe has always been injured for the last 2 seasons that we've had him. Kieran Tierney has had untold numbers of injuries during his time for Arsenal. And yet apparently we have what's described here as, quote, unbelievable luck. Ridiculous. Yeah. The rhetoric around Arsenal's supposed luck associated with injuries, a load of rubbish. That's not to say that other clubs don't have injuries. That's not to say that other clubs are more unlucky than we are. But the idea of suggesting that Arsenal have luck when it comes to injuries is just a load of bollocks. It's a load of rubbish. It doesn't make any sense at all. Let's scroll up a little bit into the chat box, shall we? Andrew says, I'll stay in the chat. I've nothing to prove. Andrew joining the pile of others that still haven't got the front to come on. Kieran says, you can't get backups for these elite players seems weird to me. By that standard, every great team would only have a good 11. An Odegaard backup could play alongside him too. Kieran, I'm going to say this again. I'll try and say it with more explanation for you so that it makes sense. At no point have I said that a team would only be 111. I've said that Arsenal's practice in signing players is about signing assets for the side. Arsenal don't tend to sign backups. Neither do Man City. Neither do Liverpool. Liverpool, Manchester City and Arsenal, when they go out and sign players, they sign players that can operate in multiple positions. They're not backups. They're players that have got the quality to start on the left or on the right or through the middle or as attacking midfielder or as a box-to-box midfielder or as a DM. They don't go out and sign players that are just designed to be backups other than very rarely. And when they do that, or when Arsenal have done that in the past with, ironically, the deal for Fabio Vieira to a degree, or with City with Sergio Gomez, who, of course, is now left after losing out on that left-back spot, they tend to be players that are way off the level of the starter, and they're just about a cheap depth option. But any cheap depth option for us in attacking midfield is going to be no better than playing Havertz there, or no better than playing Saka there, or no better than investing minutes into somebody like Ethan Nwaneri. So this idea of you can't get backups for these elite players being weird to you, as you put it, I don't really get how it can be weird to you, because the idea of Arsenal signing a backup to Saka or a backup to Odegaard and those players being happy to be specialised in those positions, it's just mad. Graham says, who can start in Odegaard's position? As I've mentioned before already on the show, you've got Moreno, who's currently annoyingly injured, that we did sign. You've got Havertz, who can play there. You've got Trossard, who can play there. And you've got Nwaneri, of course, who can also play there. There's also a point that we can't actually change our structure. We don't have to play 4-2-3-1. We don't have to play 4-3-3. We can actually change the structure as well. You could switch to a 4-4-2 and you play Havertz and Jesus together, playing off one another. And of course, have Saka and Martinelli on the wide areas, and then have a double pivot like a Partey and a Jorginho, of course, as well, or a Partey and a Rice when he's available to us. We don't have to stick to that 4-3-3. I think in the coming weeks, we've talked about it. A lot of people have suggested in the chat box for a long time that Zinchenko should play in midfield. I think we may see that experimented with. It wouldn't surprise me that against Bolton, you see Zinchenko in midfield. It may be something that we see. It could happen, and I wouldn't write it out. We've got a lot of left backs at the moment. So the idea of using Zinchenko as maybe as a midfielder is something that you might see happen in the coming weeks as well. Let's go to Magamba says, although a crucial player, we must not be dependent on one for our attack. Let them deal with the Odegaard and come up with those different options. If we win, no one cares. If we lose the next 3 games, it will be on the management. Of course, Arsenal's squad is going to be hurt by this. The idea that Arsenal are going to be as good as they were without Odegaard is a fallacy. That is not going to happen. Without Odegaard, we aren't going to be as good, because he is one of, if not our best player. And so when you're looking at that situation and you're looking at a loss that big, it's going to have an impact. But what is right is to point out that you cannot be beholden to one player at this level. You can't be to one. Now, annoyingly, we're without a lot more than just one player at this point in time. We could be missing a number of others as well for that weekend also. So I'm hoping that Jesus is back. I'm hoping that we can utilize Havertz and Jesus perhaps together in a double system up top. But we need to make sure that we've just got enough to beat this game, get through this game, and get through however many games next we need to do. Winning at City, we were always the underdogs, whether or not we had 7 injuries or 0 injuries. We were never going to be the favourites for that game. It's always going to be a challenge. And it's made even harder, of course, now by Odegaard's absence on top of that. So let's see how it goes. I don't want to see Nwaneri start in this game. Trust me, if it's on the lineup and he goes with it, I'm excited to see it happen. I personally wouldn't do it. The idea of starting Nwaneri in this game just seems absolutely mad to me. Arteta may prove me wrong and do it anyway. I think it would be mad to start Nwaneri in this game. Absolutely mad to do it. The idea of investing minutes into Nwaneri with Vieira gone was not designed for this situation. For this situation, you move the cogs around, you change different positions, you change people into different roles. That's what's more important. Tamba says, morning, Moreno breaks his arm during his... It was a shoulder injury, not his arm, it should be pointed out. A Declan Rice controversial red card. Calafiori is injured during the international break, and now Odegaard ankle injury. What a few scrap weeks for us. It's not been great, has it, Tamba? It's been... Our luck at the start of this season has been absolutely horrendous. It's no surprise that the mood around the club is incredibly low. Kazang says, why is it called the international break when the players don't get a break? Because it breaks your players, mate. That's why it's called the international break, because it breaks them. Sinister, thank you so much for the kind donation. This injury will cause Edu to catch massive heat about the transfer. As we've already kind of discussed, the idea of this particular injury raising any kind of transfer argument, I don't buy. I just don't get it. I think it's easily argued away, to be honest. Jim says we should have taken Cazorla. Thank you, Jim, for the kind donation. Jalali's been with us now for 11 months. Thank you for the support. Chardino says, how would you line up against Tottenham? As I said, at the moment, if Jesus is fit, it would be a combination of Jesus, Havertz, Trossard as your three, kind of attacking in that role, and then Jorginho and Partey if Odegaard isn't fit, of course, which would be a surprise, I think, if he is, but we'll see. Saka on the right-hand side. So your front four is Jesus, Havertz behind, Trossard and Saka. And then, of course, Jorginho and Partey as kind of a double pivot, if you like, in the midfield. The defence, I think, you're not going to look too far past Timber, Gabriel, Saliba and White for your back four, with Rare, obviously, also in goal. Let's go to Kieran, who says the North London Derby missing Odegaard worries me much less than Etihad without him. We beat Spurs last season whilst losing the midfield battle, but Odegaard is so pivotal for our OOP shape, which is going to be tested. Ade says, let's just calm down and see what Arteta has planned with his versatile squad. It's a bit weird to think that he hasn't got this scenario covered. We can win games by playing a different style. Tex says, our fan base don't know what we really want. A full love/hate relationship of being on Arsenal fan, bro. Big up to you. Ashley says, do we compromise on Atalanta? Mean compromising loosely in terms of resting some key players. Still 7 games. Worst case scenario, ends 24 in the table. Playoff tie. Spurs, City crucial, potentially 8 behind City then. We absolutely have to beat Spurs. We absolutely have to beat Atalanta. I think it's a really important game in the Champions League run. I think it's being a bit overlooked because of the games around it. It's really important that we win that game. We may have to rotate a few players, like bringing Calafiori in. I would have brought like Jorginho in, for instance, but Rice will start that game, having missed the game against Spurs. So, Sterling, I think, will get an opportunity to start as well. So, yeah, I think there's going to be chances. Game Shot says our attack is good enough to beat Spurs. The question is if our defence will be. I don't trust the legs of a midfield with Jorginho and TP. Let Waneri get the chance to grab his Cesc, Bellerin. I just don't see it, mate. I really don't. I just don't see the idea of throwing him into this game. It would be a horrendous mistake if it goes wrong. Like, the benefits outweighing the negatives. I just don't see it. I just don't see the argument in this particular case. Against Atalanta, I would have been more open to it, even that game, but not Spurs away. I just don't get the idea of risking that. Like, I saw people tweeting things like, we need to be brave and start winning. It's not brave. Brave crosses a line into stupidity sometimes, sadly. You can be brave in your selection. I just think picking Waneri crosses that borderline into, just being a little bit naive, more than a little bit naive. Mac and Cheese says, I defy any team to be missing 3 midfielders and not look light. Even Chelsea would struggle. This is also another thing. Like, people are having a go at the transfer business. Arguably, our starting midfield is not available for the biggest away game of Arsenal's season, narratively speaking. We don't have Moreno, we don't have Rice, we don't have Odegaard. Arsenal's starting middle 3. This isn't like a Man City losing Rodri scenario. This is like a Man City losing Rodri, Silva, and De Bruyne. That's what we're talking about in terms of the contextual impact to Arsenal. We're losing our whole starting midfield. That's the reality that we've got to go to the North London Derby. And from a Spurs perspective, they have no excuses. The pressure is on them. The pressure is on them to win this game. Arsenal are so light, so battered, so broken going into this North London Derby that if you're a Tottenham fan, you should be expecting a result here. Because to go and play an Arsenal side that don't have the most important part of any team is the midfield, without question. So to go into that game knowing you're going up against an Arsenal side that do not have their starting midfield 3, arguably, like, I'll tell you what, you can laugh, you can, be hilarious as you like, Spurs fans, about this, but you're putting pressure on yourselves, because if you don't come away with anything other than a win, it's going to be a horrendous embarrassment from a Tottenham perspective. Mark says, what about Odegaard, Moreno, and Rice? There's Partey, Jorginho, Havertz as obvious choices, but what about Zinchenko and Timber in the number 6? I wouldn't risk it for this game, Mark. I know that people are saying Timber and Zinni for midfield, and I think that's something that you can trial in other games. I just think that this is not the game to experiment. I don't think this is the game to experiment with those players playing in positions they've not really played too much for this club. I just can't I just can't see it. Tizer says, I think we go with Trossard in the Odegaard position with Sterling on the left or through the middle and Saka on the right. Havertz and Rice in midfield. The pace and the ball, the recoveries is there. And Sterling was also great at that. I'm really curious how Sterling fits into this. I'm curious how Sterling fits into this team, where Arteta's going to use him, when he's going to use him. It may prove to be. I tell you what, though, like the whole Sterling signing, I am so grateful to have him over, with respect to Reece Nelson, who I like and have praised a hell of a lot. But going into these big games, I'm so grateful to have Sterling as an option rather than Reece Nelson for these fixtures. And I think that's just the reality of those two players with very different stages of their careers and different levels of quality. And it shows you why we needed to do that business on deadline day. Call it panic, call it desperation, doesn't matter. We needed to do that business, and we got that business done. Franklin says, Tom, the international break 3 weeks after the season starts when the players are in their rhythm doesn't make sense. If it's important, it should be before the preseason and make a 2-week break. There was internationals before preseason. It was called the Euros. It was called the Copa America. This is what's so mind-bogglingly and mind-numbingly irritating, is that we've just had international football. We've just had it. We don't need it 3 games into a new season. You just don't. The teams are only just back together. They're only just getting into the swing of things. Why are you detracting away from it? Yes, there's apathy towards international football, but because they're friendlies. They're glorified friendlies in this Nations League rubbish. I kind of understand it in like the CONCACAF and, North and South America. Not even necessarily South America, certainly North America. Like there's more need for those competitive international scenes, but you can time them better. You can time them far, far better. They're just so unnecessary. So unnecessary. We've got internationals 2 more times before the end of the year. You do not need 3 international breaks in the first half of a season. You just don't. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Alvamod says, thus will fuel us even more. First Marino injury, then the terrible red card, and now this. This should give us an incredible boost, not beat us down. It's hard not to feel beaten down by this. It's hard not to feel frustrated by this. It's hard not to be and feel begrudged by this. But I absolutely agree, Alvamod, that we need to use these moments as catalysts. We need to use this moment to back us. That's what's so frustrating in some ways about the irritable, boring, hyperbolic kind of rubbish that you see on your timelines, battering the club, battering Arteta, battering Edu, shouting and screaming into their microphones. I feel like I've kept the decibels above a certain level today. Like so angrily towards the club. This is the moment to get behind them. This isn't the moment to show how weak you are. This is a moment to show how strong we are and how backing we are and how appreciative we are that we've done work with this squad to get into a position that we're not going into a North London derby with Rob Holding starting. We're not going into a North London derby with Callum Chambers starting. We're not going into a North London derby with Cedric starting. We're going into a North London derby despite 7 potential players being out, with players like Havertz and Saka and Trossard and Martinelli and potentially Jesus back, maybe, with Partey still here and fit, with Jorginho in the squad, with Timber back, with Calafiori maybe, we'll see, with Gabriel, Saliba, Ben White, with Zinchenko available to us too. Like, we're going into this game, into this position with a deep squad, deeper than people give it credit for. We've got a lot of injuries at the moment, which makes it look weaker than the reality of what it is. This isn't the time to start shouting and screaming and spitting your dummy out of the club. This is the time to actually back them. This is the time to say, okay, maybe I wanted a bit more in the market, sure. But this is the point at which I want you to go and prove me wrong. Not wincing and whinging and crying into your microphones and your cameras and your Twitter feeds or your Facebook feeds or whatever. No, this is the time where you get behind them and back them. Especially again in a North London derby. This is the most tribal game that we have all season. And yet we're sitting with people infighting amongst our own fan base. Trust me, I find it difficult too. Some of the takes I've seen, they drive me mad, and I've nearly lost my own head a few times just reading some of the crazy takes on social media last night and this morning. But this should be way more about backing. This should be way, 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 way more about supporting. And sometimes I think in the crazy social media world of 2024, we lose sight of that. We lose sight of the unity that a fan base is meant to have. And that's where I'm at right now. I can get my anger out, my frustration out, talking about the international break and whatever. and also like explaining away some of the crazy takes that we've seen this morning and last night. But ultimately, what matters is Arsenal winning and back in the club, and that's ultimately what we want to see on Sunday. Criticise them when they need criticising. I just don't really see it with this. If anyone feels like they can put forward that argument, comprehensively, cohesively, as I say, my door is always open to you to come and explain it to me why I should be irritated with the club. But so often when we ask, they fritter away into the background like a Homer Simpson meme. Victor says, how come Saka and Odegaard didn't pull out like Palmer, Watkins and the likes that they went to play this coming week? With Saka, of course, Saka's fully fit. So it's on the international managers, I think, to recognise that they need a break. If Saka plays 90 minutes today, tomorrow morning is going to be one hell of a show, because the idea of Saka playing 90 minutes in 2 consecutive games, despite the fact they've called up Jared Bowen and Noni Madueke, to me would just be absolutely blasphemous. Like, it really, really would. Matt says, does anyone actually think we'll lose to Spurs? I don't see it, even with these recent knocks. The problem with these derbies is that anything can happen. Last season, we won 3-2. We were comfortable in the first half, and then all of a sudden, things crumbled in the second half. Things just started to go wrong. And we held on and held out for that 3-2 win. That should have been a very comfortable, really to the bordering on, rioting win in their new stadium. It should have been very, very comfortable after we got such a lead. But it's just where we are. Ike again says, I'm just tired of excuses. The whole excuses thing is also a lot of bollocks. Like, I get so bored and sick and tired of people bringing up saying, people are just making excuses. The thing with the whole excuses argument is, like, it would have a little semblance, a tiny little gem of weight to that argument of the whole excuses, if actually people would show up. If people would put into the chat box, I'm sick and tired of the excuses that are made for this club, but actually show up and have a proper debate about it and be able to explain that point of view and be able to explain to me and others who feel similarly that the reasons for what have happened, the reasons why Arsenal have made certain decisions, and actually explain why those points are incorrect, which never, ever happens. You get classic buzzwords like raise your standards, or you're making excuses, or, left and right, just these random words you always see. You know exactly the ones I'm talking about. You know the types of phrases that we jump onto our bingo cards every single week. And we see it all the time. But they get explained away so simply, and yet they're so vehemently unmoved in the position, despite the evidence, despite the reasons that they're given. They're just never going to change their point of view. They're not open-minded enough to change the point of view. I've changed my view on this club so many times throughout the course of this Arteta tenure. I was like, that's a bit of a brave appointment, to I don't see how he can continue, to I'm so glad we didn't sack him, to I'm so desperate for him to sign a new contract now because I'm worried that indeed it's getting to a panic station point. I don't think it is. I think he will sign a new deal. But my view on the manager has changed so fluidly over the course of the last 5 years. But yeah, it's just amazing how you can stand so unwaveringly beside a point of view that can be explained away so simply. That's what I struggle with. That's what I can't get. And what makes it worse is that you never, ever see that point of view ever fronted up when it's asked to be fronted up. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Keith says, oh my God, this is BS. All for what? Oh, Tom, the season's done. What about the clown referee, Tom? I'm lost for words. I'm definitely going to blow a gasket now. Keith, you got to chill. As always, as I've just gone on a very emotive rant there and throughout the last 38 minutes, it's just football. It is just football at the end of the day. I'm going to a wedding this weekend. Our good friend of the show, Owen's wedding this weekend. And like the North London Derby is the day after. Things that happen in your personal lives are so much more important. Like so much more important. When I'm done with this show, my mood, my frustrations that I've been talking, because you're allowed to get frustrated. You're allowed to be emotive about it. You don't need to tell me to calm down. You don't need to check if I'm all right, because as soon as this show finishes, I'm going to be absolutely fine. As soon as the game is done on Sunday, I'm going to be absolutely fine, because I've just learned to detach myself, because it's pointless. It's just a game. It's just a game. It's my job. It's my life. But all the time, it's just a game. And there's so many more things in my life that are way more important than footy, than Arsenal. You know, it's really important to me, but there's so many more important things to actually get irritated by, to actually lose your mind over, to actually get angry about, to actually let affect your mental health about. So many more important things than football. So just don't let it, you know, and if it is, you need to take yourself away from it. You need to be able to break away from it because the football is having such a detrimental effect on your own mental health, on your mental state, on your mood, on the way in which you talk to other people, the way in which you interact with other people, the way in which you interact with your friends and family. It's not for you, at least not for a bit. You need to break away from it because it shouldn't be. Football should never, ever, ever come between you and your family and your friends and stuff. It just shouldn't. So yeah, don't let it. Just don't let it. Mark says the Spuds will be very cocky, as they often are, and frequently the loss of a key player can cause the team to up their game. We can take the Spurs by surprise. Winning Ways says my perfect window would have been Calafiori, Moreno, Neto, Brahim Diaz, Sterling on loan, and Gyökeres. Oh, mate, Christmas come early there. RRDM says our role is fans. Let's play our true role, and we may or may not win. Let's just not be fickle. Uncle Mad says everyone is over panicking. We will be fine. We've got a soft ass fan base, man. Okay, says as I always say, it's just football. Panic station fans need to chill. Players get injured and get better to play again. At least Rice is not injured, just suspended. Silla says with Sterling, Arsenal are looking at Man City version 1 while Man City are on version 7. I don't know what that means. Oh, I see what you mean. With Sterling, Arsenal are looking like Man City version 1 while Man City are on version 7. I mean, if the difference between version 1 City and version 7 Arsenal City is 2 points, that's quite a lot of versions to go through with only 2-point difference. Oki says, I feel for the club here. Inept international physios and coaches have allowed a clearly unfit and injured player to keep playing, but as club captain, Martin shares some of the blame as well. There's to a degree. You've got to look at Odegaard to a degree. Not to the degree some people have abused the bloke for, but certainly to a certain level. Kieran says, thoughts on Partey in the right 8 role? I think maybe we'll want Havertz there, but we have seen Partey right 8 before against Villa away in 22-23, and I think he has played the 8 a lot in his career. I think that he will play further ahead of Jorginho if indeed we play with a midfield 3. I think Jorginho will be at the base and Partey will be more slightly further ahead. I think that's what will probably happen. Tizer says, Tom, any reason why no one went for Diaz at Madrid? I can't see him getting much game time. And I mean, because he'd rather be a backup at Real Madrid than be a backup at Arsenal, to be honest, mate. That's the easiest explanation for it. Edan says these things happen and we should be able to win anyway. Let's a test for us. Let's see what happens. Lolu says, I will believe a formation change when I see it. Arteta isn't known for that. Again, we'll have to wait and see. Mark says, Tom, do you have any news on the health of Jesus? If we put Havertz in the midfield, Jesus is a logical choice for the 9. And what about Tomiyasu? Not yet, Mark. We'll hear from Arteta, of course, on Friday. There's a few whispers going around social media, as there usually is. But no, injuries are something that are really... they're probably the worst reported thing. Alongside player wages, the worst reported things. You tend to not... And especially, I'm never a fan of injury updates, especially of like when players are out or missing. The idea of leaking that information really is a bugbear of mine. Even as a journalist, you know, you want to break stories, you want to get scoops, but why would I want to help my opposition? You know, I report on Arsenal, but I'm an Arsenal fan as well. I don't really want to report something that's going to help the opposition, to be fair. So I think you have to report things that are, you know, explanatory, opinionated, but the idea of leaking injury news that might help the opponent, I'm not too keen on that. Sort of things. Sanuga says, I believe this is Odegaard's 3rd injury in a week. Brighton, Norway practice and Norway friendly. Your body has a way of telling you it's breaking down before it does. Mikey says, Arteta won the FA Cup playing a different formation. That's a very good point. Matt G says, Tom, who will be our captain while Odegaard is out? Saka, I think. I think Saka will probably take the armband while Odegaard is out. I'd imagine, yeah, it'll probably be Saka. Jamil says, what is our minimum points tally we need from our next 3 league games? I feel we cannot drop many more if we want to challenge. I think 6 is the minimum points tally. You know, City is always going to be very tough. Always going to be very tough. We drew there last season, was a brilliant result. If we get 7 points for the next 3 games, Obviously, if the draw is against Leicester and we've beaten City and Spurs, it's going to feel pretty hollow. But if you can get 7 from those next 3 games, I'll be pretty happy with it. Especially if the draw is obviously against City. That's where you'd want the draw. You'd want to win there, but the idea of drawing against Leicester or Spurs, but beating City and Leicester, I'd rather the draw be against City. I think that'd give you more confidence again. Ajmal says, I know it's been a while since Saka played centre mid, and he was excellent there. Do you think Saka in midfield, playing Sterling right wing, would also work? Maybe. I just can't see it. I just can't see Saka being used internally. It's just not something I see Arsenal doing. Right, I'm going to end things there. Thank you so much for everybody that's tuned in. We did open the door up, obviously, to the floor to those that were vehemently against what we were saying, but as usual, no one's here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you to the nearly 1,700 of you that are watching on social media and, of course, YouTube too. And I'll be back with you tomorrow. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Let me know how condescending I've been again, and I'll speak to you very soon. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.